I would now like to introduce the members of our panel discussion, The Future of Design. Been very much looking forward to this discussion, as I hope you have been. We all know that AI is rapidly creeping into our creative lives. In this discussion, our panel of experts will share varied perspectives on how generative AI will impact the practice, ethics, and value of creativity in a digital world. I'd like to welcome back Elliot Brown, who's presented earlier this morning, who's representing graphic design. Also welcome back Ashraf Gori, who presented on comics this morning and will represent illustration industry. I'd also like to welcome Razan Takash, a film writer, director, and producer, and Fiona Robertson, who is a media lawyer at OSN, representing the law side of using AI. The panel will be moderated by Afroz Noaf, head of our Middlesex film studio here at Middlesex University. And you will have time to ask questions at the end of the discussion. So once again, please put them in the Q&A session and we'll put those to the panel members. For now, please welcome all our panel members. And Afroz, I will pass the emceeing over to you.
Thank you, Margot. Thank you very much. All right, good afternoon to all of you, and thank you to all my panelists for joining today. Today's panel discussion is on the transformative power of AI in creativity. And, as we navigate through the realms of film, graphic design, and the broader implications of copyright law, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment in the evolution of creative expression. And today we're here not only to explore the remarkable advancements AI bring to our industries, but also to critically reflect on how we as creators engage with this technology. As a film and design professor myself, my stance on AI is grounded in the belief that these tools should not be seen as a crutch that hinders our creative thinking. Instead, I advocate for a synergistic approach where AI acts as a catalyst that amplifies our ability to think, ideate, and innovate. In this dialogue today, we're joined by our distinguished panelists who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience from the field of graphic design, illustration, film, and copyright law. And I've curated some questions across all the fields that we covered today. And as we explore these topics, I encourage all the panelists to share their insights and perspectives freely. Let's start with a temperature question. Let's take, do you believe that integration of AI in your respective fields represent a threat to the traditional creative role, or do you see it as an invaluable tool that enhances the process? Elliot, thank you for joining us today. Let's start with your perspective on this question.
Yeah, I think to begin with, threat at this stage is not something that I necessarily see. I think if I look at a way that we sort of smiled at it in the studio when there was the addition of AI generative logos, and you could put in a prompt around what you wanted it to be. And we sort of had a look at that in the studio and quickly realized that we were safe for now. But no, I think one of the tasks I sort of looked at myself and my team to do was, and I think you've been using this word a lot there in your intro, is to actually look at it as tools. On a daily basis, we generally will use a lot of software that allows us to progress concepts into actual usable assets for our clients. So things like Adobe, Illustrator, Photoshop, etc., XD, and so on and so forth. They're all digital-based tools that help streamline workflows for us and allow us to create outside of pen, paper, and drawings, etc. So when we start to look at some of those assets, one of the biggest changes that, very quickly that came about was Adobe's introduction with the generative kind of tool that they used within Photoshop as opposed to Illustrator. We found that incredibly useful in terms of image generation, from a basic level of being able to extend images when it's not quite wide enough with a background scene, or, whether there was something, a little bit different or strange and wonderful that we wanted to create from a completely made up Adobe Firefly or something like that. So on a creative side, I see it, there's an ability for it to potentially enhance. There's automation that can be in there in terms of generation of color palettes, typographic choices. There's even tools out there from a copyright perspective that you can now do quicker digital searches around, the bespokeness of any given kind of identity system. But going back to even something I was talking about this morning, we also use the tool for that substance aspect of it, the thinking, the strategic insights that we can gain from using something like a, ChatGPT, or I think Google just renamed their Bard to Gemini, where you can actually, as long as it's about the prompts, right? So the AI is only as good as, I think, the information you can feed into it, personally, is what I believe. So if you can ask the right questions, you can gain incredible insights around, competitors, their positionings, understanding where they are and what they're doing. And you can gain valuable insights around some of the strategic sort of foundations that we would want to have in place when utilizing that into any brand creation process. So I think for me at this stage, it's so new. It's about seeing how we can use them as tools to enhance the output to deliver better for our partners and clients that we are here and working for.
Thank you very much. Just when you said the Firefly part, I remember looking at it and thinking, oh my God, the hours that I've spent, because I started my journey as a graphic designer, to the hours I have spent mapping and remapping things. I'd like to give you a quick follow-up question on that. I know there are a lot of people, because, from a perspective of using AI, there's a lot of exploration going on, but very little of actual execution. There's a thin line that's kind of separating everyone going from that exploration to execution stage. How much would you say that you are currently implementing with these tools in the market? At what percentage are you now using these to ship your products out?
Minimally, I would say, just through probably the workflows that we have more than anything else and understanding them. I think, like you've just touched on there, Firefly, pre this conversation today, I sort of did a joke input to see if it would generate a image of my black French bulldog in the rain in Dubai, and lo and behold, I get 5 different images, and there's no practical use to that, but it is quite fun. I think probably from a strategic point of view, I think ChatGPT and Gemini are incredibly useful tools to gain really quick insights and understandings that can help focus briefs and even workshops with our clients. So that has been a bit of a game changer, just because it takes it a step much further beyond a Google search and actually is able to give you quantitative kind of data that can really impact that thinking. I think from the creative side, it's more, it's definitely more minimal, because it's about sort of enhancing. It's about, like I say, images might not have enough space for us, so we want to generate a wider background to be able to apply something to it. We still generate things like 3D models through us building them, and I know that there'll be a stage at which that will be able to be automated, which would be great and a huge time saver. And I think if there's ways we can save time, I see it at that. So the short answer is a little bit at this stage, but I see that growing over time as the tools, I think, kind of refine themselves and almost find their uses within different industries and the ways that we can understand them, because it's just like they've gone, here you go, and we've got to go, okay, well, how do we use it? And I think we've got to find those sort of ways and means to enhance what we do. So
all right, awesome. Thank you very much for that. And now on to Brazan. We're neighbors, and of course we have a bit of overlap in our path with both academia and our own practices. So I'm really interested to know what's your take on all things AI from all the perspectives that you're currently tackling.
Hi, neighbors. Well, I would say that the most essential thing to understand about AI when it comes to film is it's not what AI can do, it's who is using it to do what. It's really about whose hands is it falling into. AI can be just like any other advance in technology in the history of cinema. It can be a wonderful tool to make our work more efficient, to actually support the craft that is quite difficult anyway. It can use all the kind of facilitation it can have. But it has become very controversial, not because of what it does, but because of who's trying to use it. And when you try to use technology to replace the human element, especially the creative element, this is when it becomes a problem. And we saw it cause a problem with all the strikes that happened in Hollywood for the actors and the writers, because AI was suggested to be something that would replace actors, which is unfathomable. You know, there was a very controversial clause in the new deal that they were doing with the Producers Guild, which is that an extra can be filmed and they'd be paid for only that day of shooting, and then their image would belong to that studio forever to be used in AI, and they wouldn't even be paid from that. That's nuts. That's that's crazy. So things like that. However, for filmmakers, it's the same thing as when we moved from film to digital. Like, editing film used to be quite difficult and time consuming, and transferring to digital, once we started using machines, the skill changed. The basics are still the same, but the skill itself of using, you know, editing software versus physically editing, it evolved, and it evolved the skillsmen, the artists, and it also opened up the door for them to do even more within their craft. But if you, at the time when we were doing film and somebody was like, oh, we have a software now, anybody can edit, and then you got somebody who was not an editor to edit, he's going to do a bad job, and he's going to replace somebody who's essential. So that will hinder the creative process. It will actually have a dire effect on the craft itself. So again, it's who has the buttons to the nukes. It's not, it's who's holding the steering, really, is how we can identify the effect of AI.
Okay, and thank you for that little nuke joke there. Applies, I guess, very well. And from the perspective of academia, how are you approaching the subject? Because I'm sure we both face this on our on a daily basis, where students are using these tools to cut corners rather than the full potential of it. Are you already, from a perspective of running the department at SAE, already thinking about this, or are you having discussions around it, or is it already integrated or too late?
It's definitely a nightmare, I'm not gonna lie, because just as the people up top, as in the execs and the people who have money, want to do shortcuts, people at the bottom, or students and rising and without enough experience, also want to do shortcuts. And if it's used, again, just to shorthand the process, then it's a problem. It definitely can be used as a tool. At SAE, we are quite strict with the use of AI. We consider it, if not referenced properly, then it's considered plagiarism, and then it's treated as if it's plagiarism. However, there are certain aspects, I can't speak to the other departments, but for the film department, if students want to use AI, they kind of have to pitch it. They have to pitch how they're using it, and they have to reference the use properly. And then maybe they are allowed to. And then that's, again, just if they're going to digitize something, for example, some art and the design, production design, things like that, that can help their project, elevate their project. Again, if you use AI as a supporting tool, it can be great. But if you use it to cut corners or replace processes or replace people, then it's a problem.
And from your perspective, let's say you as a director, filmmaker, or any other aspects that you're attacking from that perspective, when do you see endorsing it, or where do you see it coming the most useful to your work, especially for indie filmmakers? There are areas, for example, storyboards, from struggling to find, you know, elements for other aspects. It really does act as a tool to kind of give you that push, that initial push to run. So where do you see it being integrated in your personal journey?
Yes. It is quite helpful in not in the filmmaking process itself, but the tool that I personally really think it's the most helpful for us filmmakers, because we're crazy and we're not great communicators most of the time, and it's very hard for us to bring out what's in our heads and put it on the table for everybody else to understand. And I think one of the best things that I've experienced recently is the use of Midjourney for that, for conceptualization, for storyboarding, like you said. For example, we just shot a film. It's a post-apocalyptic film that we shot in Jordan, And it's quite a big project. It's a 25-minute film. It's high budget. It's a genre. And it was very tough raising the money. It took us 5 years of trying to raise the money. And we finally shot it last year. I've been working on it since 2018. And we needed money. And the traditional platforms were difficult to approach for financing because it's a genre movie and they tend to support drama and things like that. So we needed to go elsewhere. So if I'm going outside of the film industry, trying to get an investor or to get a sponsorship, these people are not filmmakers. They're not going to read a script and understand and see. So we used a lot of Midjourney to create visuals. We also did crowdfunding and we created visuals that we can use in the crowd, things that can sell the idea to people and represent what we have in our heads. One of the biggest things that actually worked out for us is that we approached an energy drink for a product placement deal where they would place a product in the film and they'd give us money for the product, but it can't be like an ad, it has to be part of the story. So we couldn't film that for them to convince them, and it's been very hard to convince people of product placement until I used Midjourney. And it's a post-apocalyptic survivor story, so the man uses the tin cans in the building of his house and where he lives and things like that. He's in a cave, so it's integrated. He grows plants out of it. So I couldn't sketch. And even if you sketch, it's not the same. So we used Midjourney and we took their can and we placed it in the storyboards of the film, and we sold them on the idea and we managed to get the money out of them. So again, it's really in that prep work, I think, because preparation for film is insane and it requires just hours and time and hands. And AI can be a great tool for that, for pre-production work and things like that. Imagine what we can do with budgeting and scheduling moving forward. But you still need a producer on top to make these decisions. But AI can streamline the process much better and get us to do things more efficiently and open the door for more creative work because we're not, dying for money and time.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with many of your parts, and we've also incorporated Midjourney and DALL-E into our curriculum as well, where they're churning out, especially in the planning phase. But I also do agree to the point that there should be someone overseeing the process to make sure that you're extracting the exact element that you want in there. And of course, like you said, for indie filmmakers, it's definitely a helpful tool to kind of move things along. And like you said, imagine things. Not everyone's a blessed sketch artist to come up with concepts. So yeah, sure. Thank you very much for sharing that. And I want to move on to, I definitely I see I had a point where I wanted to take through the narrative process. So maybe hopefully you're all able to connect everything that we're bringing together. First of all, Ashraf, I'm super happy to see you on the sheet. I don't know if you remember this, but during my HP days, CGI and Waqas, you guys used to churn out insane amount of assets for us. And I think I still have the book, your first illustrated book with me. So good to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining today. Now, given your, let's say, experience, how are you currently navigating the intersection of AI with traditional artistic methods, and how has it been better? Has it made your job easier, or do you think it's a newer way to go about the thought process?
I think I'm in agreement with most of the panelists over here. We're being pragmatic about it, and it's not a doomsday scenario. It's something that is helping our everyday life. And I think it was really ridiculous when it was announced, or the early days, where the comic community especially started saying, say no to AI, and they started changing their profile pic, and it was all just doom and gloom. But for me, I mean, I'm a, if any of you all know me, I have always been vocal about adopting new tech and using it, and that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm actually implementing it within my work workflow, and that's it's been nothing but useful. It's never come to a point where it's overbearing or it's a threat, like you had mentioned earlier. But then it's something that is of constant benefit, and I'm actually using some of these elements to incorporate into my my working pipeline. So to end of the day, we want to create the work faster and more efficiently. We only have like these many hours. And if we can shorten our work day, well, hey, why not?
Yeah, I mean, but let me ask you the same question again. From exploration to implementation, all right? How much do you say of the workflow is it currently taking? I also know you're a forward thinker. You also pretty much endorse technology from a perspective that you see it as an accurate tool for you to run faster. I know this, having known you for a couple of years now. So how do you see this being implemented? Like, at what percentage are you currently at, and at what point would you take that to a higher percentage?
Okay. From a practical standpoint, I say I'm at 50-50 at this point, which is very good, because it's helping me quite a bit. And I think the future of creative work is going to be 50-50. You need to put in your initial input and let AI maybe take in further. There's some technology now where people are coming up with simpler sketches or 3D renders, simple blocky shapes, and the command prompt is taking care of the rest. And we're talking about like 3D animation, real time. So this is exactly where I see it's headed, where there's going to be a healthy mix of the creator input, the creative input coming in from the artistic side, and then AI will take it further. So I have been experimenting with a new technology called Magnific, which is an AI upscaler. I'm one of the so the guy who created this, it's sort of burst onto the scene, and it's really catching on fast.
Could you give us
So,
the name of the URL so that we can put it for our put it into the chat box for the audience? What is it called again?
I'm not sure what the URL is, but it's Magnific AI.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So it's an AI upscaler. What it does is when you come up with a low resolution image, it adds in the detail that you want to see. It's some nuanced detail which makes it the final product not just a high resolution image, but AI is filling in the gaps. So, for example, if you're looking at,
I would say pretty much, I think, overlapping with Firefly, and I think Firefly is running at like every
not exactly,
Okay.
because like, for example, if you have an image of a garden and you have these really blurry leaves, it's actually adding definition to the leaves. It's actually creating more leaves. It's actually giving you elements what would happen inside a garden. So it's actually interpolating in a way where there's input in there as well. So this is something I think it's a very exciting new technology. It's definitely going to be a big part of the I think Adobe and everyone would most likely start implementing this kind of AI, and not just standard upscaling.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And I think that brings us to the exact intersection where I wanted to actually bring this point. I can see Fiona smiling from there. Talking about the 50-50 integration, artist and AI coming in handy. How do you think, from your perspective and your viewpoint and everything that's unfolding around you, are you for it? Are you seeing this as an opportunity or a challenge? And how do you think everything evolving from an intellectual property manner as well?
So obviously, sitting at a broadcaster, we don't have a huge view about AI in particular. Our view is always that content is content, good content is good content, and bad content can be created by humans as well as by machines. We're always looking for good content, and if AI can make and help people get there at a lower cost, faster, in a more efficient way, I'm all for it. Legally, of course, it does present some difficulties, and I think one of the things that's causing a lot of the questions amongst creatives that are using AI is the fact that we've got multiple cases coming out of multiple jurisdictions that are saying the same things in some places, different things in others. So you've got the US at the moment, which I have to add is an incredibly conservative jurisdiction when it comes to granting copyright protection, because they're one of the few jurisdictions that requires you to do a registration with the Copyright Office. And the Copyright Office is a pretty conservative beast at best of times. So they're rejecting applications, and you will have seen probably a couple of cases. There was a fairly famous animation. It was a comic book, I think, called Zarya of the Dawn. It was one of the early AI cases. The gentleman who created that particular comic book popped it in for copyright registration, and they accepted it initially thinking that he had done it. But when they realized that AI had contributed a huge percentage of the content, they then took the copyright registration away from him. And what they did say at that time was that they would be perfectly happy to register those bits that he could identify as original material. And we've had a couple of cases since then where people have refused to say, I did this bit, the machine did that bit, because they're trying to get a view from the Copyright Office about the totality of the registration, and that's not been forthcoming. So that's the US register, and that's kind of, that's the US. That's just one country. We tend to look at it, they tend to be quite newsy and a bit blabby about what they do, but that is only one country. In the UK, the only couple of cases I've seen have been very low-level creatives, and I think you have to kind of remember that low-level creativity, whether it comes from a human or a machine, is not going to be copyright registerable because it's not creative enough. You have to have creativity. And going right back to, a million years ago when we used to have phone books, people used to try and claim copyright in phone books, and you'd be like, that's not original, it's just a list. We've got that same issue coming in with AI as well, because a lot of that low-level stuff is being created by machines and people are trying to claim copyright in it. It's probably not going to work. But just to make things even more confusing, just coming out of China this week, and China is obviously not a jurisdiction everybody looks at, but it is an interesting jurisdiction from a copyright perspective because they're really rubbish at copyright protection. J.K. Rowling has tried to sue people there for years for the fake Harry Potter books that they've been putting out in Chinese, and it's been a struggle for her. But this week, maybe it was last week in China, a case came out where the courts did assign 100% protection to an AI generated image. And the reason the courts did this, and when you think about the process of creativity, you can see the reasoning of the courts is that the gentleman involved in the creation did an incredibly specific prompt, but he didn't just do one prompt. Once he got the image, he kept going and kept going and kept going. And he did over 120 different prompts to create the exact image that he wanted to present as his artistic piece. And you can see that that is an incredibly different process to just typing in Fiona Robertson, lawyer, Dubai, and up you're going to get my face because of the training of the beast. So you're going to see me. So this guy put an incredible amount of personal effort and creativity into it, tweaking tiny little pieces of the AI, and in essence using the tool as a pen rather than a generative piece of software. And they gave him copyright protection. So you can see we're still at a point around the world where we are waiting for the big decision that tells us everything we need to know. And just adding to that, I think we have to remember that machine creation is never going to be in and of itself. It's not going to be copyrightable. And we know that because of the monkey case. If you all maybe remember the monkey who took the selfie, it must be about 8 years ago. It's one of my favorite all-time cases. He stole a camera from a photographer. He took a selfie of himself. The selfie went viral. Everyone wanted to put it in calendars. And Peter tried to get rights for the monkey so that the monkey could get the money from that. And that didn't work. So if a monkey can't get copyright, then I don't think a machine can either.
Thank you so much for that. I think it kind of transitioned into the next question. I mean, ultimately, I believe it all comes down to the industry as well and the forward-thinking nature of the industry in itself. Because if you look at the digital art side in the blockchain and the NFT side, you can see that there's a completely different reception out there where the assets are now tangible value. Like I've seen generative AI stuff that went from, I would say like $5 to $20,000 and people actually creating these things. And it also comes back to the intersection of what you just mentioned as well. It's not just about one prompt. It's about the 50, 70, 80 prompts that people need to like refine and refine. That is very much about the thought process of the artist himself than just AI spitting out information. I guess that brings me to my next question, where it's, do you think that there is a need to redefine what constitutes an author in the digital age? Or do you think legal frameworks should adapt to address the question of authorship in the current digital age and everything that's happening around it?
I will say from the start that the legal systems are always quite slow at catching up with technology and its advances. And if you have a look at any of the really early internet cases, you can see the way the court is trying to get a concept and push it into the technology box so that it can work in a way that they find logical. So I think it'll take another couple of years before we do get to where creatives will want it to be. I don't think machines will get copyright so much, but I think what will happen is that there will be a dilution of the copyright to the percentage that you're not creatively involved. So, you know, if you've done 50% effort, you get kind of 50% protection. I think that's probably more likely. But the other thing I think is that we need to look at as well is the way that AI is training and the kind of material that it's using for training and how that impacts on people's rights as well. And I think that too, those two are very powerful dynamics that work against each other. It's protection for people who have already created versus protection for people who wish to create using those historical creative pieces. I think that's going to cause a lot of tension in the way that the legal system has to deal with it, because we need to address both of those rights. It's very important. You can't move forward without looking back, but at the same time, looking back, that's all that AI does, is look back. It trains on what exists, not on what will exist tomorrow.
Awesome, thank you. And I would and one more follow-up question. What advice would you offer to creators and artists in protecting their works? Because today replication styles and generating similar content, everything's out there. Are traditional IP protection sufficient, or should new measures be considered?
Look, it's a really difficult question. I often get calls from photographers who've had their beautiful photos of a sunrise over the Dubai skyline taken and popped in a book or stuck on a calendar. It happens far too often. And it is really, really difficult to protect your rights. No matter how you generate work, it is difficult. There's a process of registration that you can go through, but that's not necessarily proof of originality. So what I always say to people is to be very diligent in writing down your influences, the reasons why you made it purple, the reason why it's round, the reason why the story progressed this way, the reason why you placed, thinking about your influences, writing them down. And when it comes to AI, like, you keep a record of your prompts, keep a record of how you got to where you are. Because if your prompts quite clearly show original thought, then you're going to have a better process and a better ability to defend that, rather than putting in, rainy day in Dubai, Picasso style. And as soon as you put in Picasso style, you're coming into the world of derivatives. So you have, that original thought kind of falls away. It's harder to argue. So I always say to people, keep a creative diary. It's such a simple thing to do. But when you're creating something, like, where did this come from? Where did this idea come from? When you were sitting in the car in the rain and you saw the girl in the yellow dress, and then you knew that was the thing that you needed to add to this project. Write it down, and everything that you write contemporaneously is extremely helpful in defending things later on.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that last bit was people are thinking, because I know that there's discussions happening all around the world about tracking your prompting, especially from the perspective, see if your style is being incorporated. So thank you very much for that. Another question for Elliot. Because it's that design fest, and a lot of our students might be thinking about this as well. And I'm sure from a branding perspective, how can AI tools, for example, contribute or detract from creating a brand's identity, specifically talking from a perspective of emotionally resonating with consumers?
Good question. I think it's like what we've all been talking about around here. It all comes back down to how you control it as a tool. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. You know, if we were to do and utilize AI to create, say, a basic logo for and that's probably a good way to do this, a basic logo for a cafe, you may get an output that's a usable asset as a logo, but that doesn't make a brand, okay? And I think that's the thing to remember. And it's building around, well, what is brand and how do we create it? And it's so much more than the visual aspect of the brand. So the tools out there are usable within the sense. And as I'd sort of mentioned earlier, we certainly use them for the research part of it and the strategic foundations part of it, which is what feeds into then our creative process and utilizing that thinking as a lens to create. And I think, you know, if you were to use it to then take that information and use that to direct your prompts, you may get a better output than coffee shop in the lakes, for instance, or something like that. Because if you've defined audiences, you've defined positioning, you've defined your purpose, and you've defined your, you know, your basic nuts and bolts and tools of what the brand is about, and you've defined how you want your tone of voice to be. If you haven't done that, then your output from AI is going to be very basic and general, and you know, you would end up looking like everybody else out there. And probably our biggest task to do when creating anything graphically for our clients and when we're building brands is to make sure that we're completely differentiated to anything that's out there. So I think, you know, it's our task to make sure that that is the case. And I still think I haven't seen anything yet in the creation of brand that makes me think, you know, I'm out of a job tomorrow. I think it's very much seeing tools that can enhance kind of workflows, create efficiencies in how we output. You touched on one that's a great one in terms of, you know, cutting out of images, hours spent in that. It's a click of a button now. That's a game changer in terms of workflow. But in terms of end product, I still believe, and I could be wrong, and it probably might change in a very quick period of time, but I still believe that as humans over AI, we are better placed to create stronger outputs at this stage. As a tool, it's still sort of in its infancy.
Awesome, thank you. And another question to add to that: if you were, let's say, given access to AI when you were in your, say, final year at college, how would you approach the subject? And with the experience that you currently have and the understanding that you have, how would you uniquely incorporate that into your practice right now as a young creative?
Experimentation. I think everything and anything with the biggest way I learned at college and then university. At art college, we got a really kind of wide experience of fine art, ceramics, photography, graphic design, fashion design. I was terrible at that. But what it sort of opened you up to is this idea of experimentation and where concepts and thinking can kind of come from and be an inspiration. So in those formats and in those disciplines, we were always encouraged to break the rules, try different things, and just play around with what possibilities could be. And I think because, you know, students are probably best placed, if I always feel that being a little bit older, that I'm always playing catch up as these generations and these new sort of tools and assets. Each time Adobe has a new release, there's another new way to do it. And I'm probably still there doing, you know, Control-C and trying to draw things around it and being a lot more kind of labor intensive than I probably need to be. So I think for me, you know, the advice would be to play with it and see what the possibilities there are in a way that it can potentially enhance. I don't think it should ever replace, and it should never be the default. But I think it's, you know, again, using the word tool, seeing it as a tool, it's only going to continue to evolve. It's only going to continue to further move into our creative realms and our worlds. And I think it's just finding ways that it becomes really useful to creating a better output at the end of it. So I would say experimentation, have fun, play around, see what it can do, and then where that could take you in terms of a journey.
Thank you. And to Razan, I know sometimes the hardest point in a filmmaker's life is to get that idea out in terms of writing, especially in the writing process. A lot of time is spent on, thinking and coming up with connections before you sit. And it's always the reason, right? Yeah, I'm still thinking about my story. I'm still connecting my story. Do you ever see this becoming a part from a perspective of it being major help, especially to make sure the authentic voice and vision stays? But do you think AI would play any part in that process of storytelling?
To be honest with you, I don't. The thing about ideation is that it's something out of nowhere, right? It's creative. Yes, we are heavily influenced by everything that we've seen before. But generally, the starting points come from somewhere deep. The thing that so far, and again, we're talking about the current technology. I don't know what will happen later, but the way that AI, especially something like ChatGPT, is right now, is that it is not creating anything new. It is mainly taking in influences from what already exists and combining it into something that is safe and digestible. And it's really it's like it cannot go more than first or second dimension of what that concept is. And the thing is, if you want to tell authentic, diverse stories, ChatGPT won't find enough of them to create to create something. It will always go to what already exists the most. So it's pretty much what we already know, just a regurgitated version of that. Now, what to help with ideation and use it as a tool, that is definitely something you can do. Like one of the things we did in a workshop with AI is actually come up with an idea, is building and designing characters and then prompting Mid-Journey or even ChatGPT for the images to create visuals of people as inspiration for types of characters, combining two different archetypes together and see the kind of images we get. Same thing for locations, because we are visual artists, filmmakers, and when we see something, it opens up a lot of things in our heads for even more and more levels and layers. But if you go to something like AI and be like, I want a movie about, and they give you something, they're going to give you the most generic thing it can possibly think of. And I think without AI, we have enough generic storytelling in the world, and I wouldn't want to add to it.
True. Thank you. And last question to Ashraf as well. Going into the field of animations, and now that you are, trying from your own ways within the country, and given the spectrum of animation education in the market, how do you think AI would help students or young storytellers to come up with ideation, even if it's not field specific, because storytelling is storytelling. A lot of people, because I'm also coming from the perspective of as an educator, I've had students come up with scripts and develop ideas for animations, for animated shorts or animated features, but not having that technical capability. What they try to do is go out in the market to see if they can collaborate with someone. For a dynamic like that, what would be your advice to see like how AI could play a part in pushing the envelope forward to bring the industries closer to collaboration than attacking it from a perspective of a separated line of art?
I say to students, learn the basics. Have a know-how, especially like something like Blender. Such an amazing piece of software, and it's completely free, open source. Well, learn that, have that in your knowledge and your arsenal, and then take that further with AI. So instead of depending entirely on AI or prompts or video generators to come up with complete scenarios, you'll always have a better advantage if you have the capability of actually doing the work and laying the groundwork and then using AI to develop it further. So I say this can help in two ways. On one end, it can help with the early conceptualizing work, for example, storyboarding and all. By the way, I don't think somebody mentioned that it's an existential threat for like storyboarding artists or or animators for that matter. I don't think it is like that, because I get more storyboard work now than what I did before AI came out. So
and why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? From your perspective, that
so
it as a threat?
AI is creating one complete image in the sense that it understands it. Whereas, like, for example, I'll give you a storyboard scenario. The director wants to see a very, very particular vision. They want to see a flower in the twinkle of an eye, or something very, the blur this and then, angle this, and, good luck trying to get AI to get you that exact image. So this is where I tell, do your initial work. And then so if you're good at 3D, for example, you can come up with a blocky image, and then maybe AI can sort of fill in the rest. So that will help. It'll help you do things faster. So for example, most of my backgrounds are now AI. I do it in a specific style, clean it up with a generation, stick it behind, and draw the character in front. And so it's whatever it is, it's like 50% faster than what it used to be, right? And so I don't think it's a threat. In fact, you had asked Fiona earlier about how can artists protect or photographers protect their artwork. For me, I think the day AI came out and your image was fed into its database, it's gone. It's out there. It's public domain. There's a thing about derivatives. This question has always been among artists, so people have always emulate something and then make their own, but then that still is their own artwork. You got inspired by something. So where do you draw the line? You get inspired by a certain art, you create your own. So AI is definitely not a copy of the artwork. It's always coming up with something based on a style of a person. If I reach a point where somebody's like Googling, hey, make me an image in Ashraf Ghori style, I was like, thank you. I'm like, I have made it. I have become a household name. This is something which for those people who actually have reached that level where if you have a certain style, people want to emulate in a certain style. As an working for an agency or before that, it's always been a client who comes up and say, hey, I want something that looks like this. So it's always been a copy. Nobody will ever come up with something so original that it doesn't exist. So same thing with the artwork. It's like if your name is out there and people are developing work in your style, it's I think it's a badge of honor. And you must have done something right, and you're probably doing really well if you reach that level.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I'm gonna try it today. I'm gonna try and see if I can generate something in Ashraf Ghori style. So
it's not gonna happen. I'm not there. Yet.
I believe we're running out of time, so I want to thank all our panelists today for their insightful contributions, and now we'd like to open the floor for questions. I believe there are some questions already. This is your opportunity to maybe ask about any topic that you think is going to affect from your respective field, and please feel free to use the Q&A panel, and you can also address it to specific panelists. I already see Steve King dropping a question. UAE has strict laws on taking photos and even owning photos of individuals. Any thoughts about if the AI somehow creates an image of you or someone looking like you? I think wild guess here. Fiona, would you like to
I'll
take?
guess. Shall I take that one?
Please.
I'm going to advise caution in the way that you use anything that's created by AI. We've already had quite a few examples of people blindly believing that AI creates things that are real. For example, court cases, it's invented court cases. And so I think if you are going to use AI heavily, please, I mean, it's not that hard to do searches and find out exactly where. It does make mistakes. It does. So please be judicious. If you're going to start circulating fake photographs and fake news in the UAE, you can expect that someone may take umbrage and come after you. So
And I believe he's followed it up with, thank you, Fiona, another question, which is, I think it's a two-parter, I guess. In the US and the UK, the Supreme Courts have ruled that creative assets built by AI is not IP and therefore is not protected. What is the local legal position, and is there appreciation of consequences of this? Are there consequences? Steve, what are you trying, first of all?
Yeah, geez, Steve, throw me a bone, mate. Okay, so we don't have any local jurisprudence on this yet. We don't know what the position is locally. Obviously, infringement of copyright is always going to be problematic. We have Copyright Act here. It is what it is. The issue we have here is one of enforcement, and I know that the government is looking at alternative methods of enforcement for copyright breaches. If we're talking about whether or not an AI work is going to be protectable under local law, my initial answer wouldn't deviate too much, possibly from the Chinese position rather than the US position, mostly because we're both civil jurisdictions and everything that passes in front of us hangs on the facts of the case in front of us. But to be honest, it hasn't been tested here, and we don't see a lot of copyright cases here. So it could take a while for us to see where this goes.
Also, Steve, let's have a conversation about this on the side. Thank you, Fiona. I see an interesting question from an anonymous attendee. Do some of you feel pressured to use AI? Who wants to take this one? I think I'll leave it up to you all. Do you feel pressured to use AI? I wonder what this person is going through to have this question, because it's definitely a tricky question. Anyone who wants to take it? Ashraf, you want to go? Did I see you raise your hand? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, pressured in a way that if you don't get on the bandwagon, you'll be left behind. In that sense, because I've always been, don't sit on the fence, dive in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good, because that's how I've been, I view it as well. It's, in fact, prompt engineering is now becoming a segment in my classes, because I did tell them, it's all about getting ahead of the curve. If you think you're graduating with your graphic design or your film degree and that makes you special, reality is going to hit quite fast. It's also about learning the technology, coming ahead of the curve to see how things come about. So I would say, even if you think you're pressured to use AI, evaluate for what it is that you think AI is going to come in and contribute to your journey, and then make your own assessments based off of that. But it definitely should be an arsenal in your tools, in your toolbox, and prompt engineering should definitely be thing that should be broadly spoken about across different platforms. Okay, here I don't know if this person's asking a tricky question, or I see that another anonymous question about needing to ask AI the right questions. Isn't the information you give it recorded to the database to be reused for other people's questions? Isn't it better to not give away information about a project and keep it mostly vague? Woo! I mean, if you guys have any perspective on it, jump in. But I would say, ultimately, I think what Fiona was talking about was to defend your position of usage of AI versus, yes, of course, it's a language learning model. It's going across every database and platform, to rapidly learn and adapt to the whole process. But it also was specifically targeting the part in order to make your work yours truly, rather than just, hey, give me a picture of a man running on the road. What about that generation makes it unique, and it's very much about your thought process. So having that as a record to kind of see if you are going the direction of using AI to generate art, I believe your prompt must be saved in order to see and even continue your work accordingly. I guess that brings us, are there any more questions? Hopefully we've answered them all. Anyone else with any questions? Any questions from the panel?
I see a question still there from
You have
Dima.
one from Dima.
I also see a question from Dima, but I believe Dima's question is, considering the impact of AI advancements, is evident that certain roles in the film industry and design, such as storyboard artists, may be affected. do you anticipate AI driving role transformation in the creative industry and possibly giving rise to new job roles that better integrate AI tools? I believe Ashraf touched about this part from that perspective of storyboarding, but I definitely would love to listen to both Razan and Elliot's take on this.
Yeah, I'd like, first I'd want to give a shout out to Dima, because Dima went to school with me as well. She's in Middlesex now. So
Incidentally, Dima's mentioned this multiple times. I believe, it's with the SAE.
Yeah.
And I think it's second floor and third floor. We always talk about this. So yeah, nice.
We went to film school together, actually. I would say there is definitely transformation that will happen, as in I think there's going to be new jobs in pre-production and in post-production, especially in VFX and compositing and things like that. You'd have like AI tool integration manager, things like that. You'll have like these kinds of things. And I think more than that, you'll see new credits. I think AI software users, people who are going to be specializing in prompts and in utilizing the tool, I think we'll start seeing them in film credits as well.
I think, yeah, I agree. And I don't think it's just localized to AI as well. I think we're going to see these advancements within technology themselves and how it all uses. I mean, I often have this conversation with friends of mine who've got kids, and I say it's kind of mind-blowing to think that by the time they get to sort of graduation, it'll be for roles and careers that don't even necessarily exist anymore, right? It's sort of, as the automotive industry moves into AI and autonomous driving cars, car insurance may become a thing of the past because hopefully there'll never be any accidents anymore. So those roles kind of go, but what are the new roles? So I kind of see that, AI and all of this sort of stuff moving in a way that will certainly generate incredible new opportunities for things that we don't necessarily even know what they might be yet.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, like I said, there are many ways to see this question in perspective, but I agree with both of you in parts, but I also see it definitely being, just understanding the various tools out there and how to even interact with AI should definitely be part of the journey, and everyone, just about getting into the world of AI. I believe we are almost running out of time. And once again, I'd like to thank all of you, Fiona, Elliot, Razan, Ashraf. Thank you very much for taking the time today. And for all the audiences that tuned in, hopefully we've managed to get you guys thinking about these and how you could possibly integrate this into your workflow. Thank you very much for tuning in, and have a good evening.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody. And
Thanks
thank you,
very much,
Afros. Thank you, Afros, for being
Thanks,
an amazing
Margot.
MC. That concludes our sessions for today. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. for another lineup of speakers. See you tomorrow.